Disney has made a lot of parks, and I mean a lot. How do they afford all this? Oh yeah, I forgot. While many of these parks are completely unique from each other and have their own theming and attractions, there is a particular type of park that Disney has built time and time again, which most would refer to as a castle park. Basically, you know how in the Magic Kingdom or Disneyland, the whole park is sort of one big circle with a bunch of different themed lands with one big, or maybe small castle in the middle acting as the main icon or anchor point of that park. While many of these parks can be unique from each other in many ways, they typically follow a pretty set formula with what lands they're going to include. Fantasyland, Adventureland, and all those other staples are what you usually expect when going to the parks, and among them is Tomorrowland, which in most cases can be the weakest out of all of them, especially in Disneyland where it is just outright bad. It's also my favorite. So today I just sort of wanted to talk about Tomorrowland and its problems, as well as why I enjoy it as much as I do. I'm mostly going to just be talking about the Tomorrowlands at Disneyland and Disney World, since those are the only ones I've been to, but I also just think they're the most interesting ones to talk about outside of like Discoveryland. So while it would probably be logical to start out with the Disneyland one since it was the first, I'm not gonna do that because to me, when I think of Tomorrowland, I think of the one in Disney World because it was the first one I ever saw, and it also does a much better job at being a well-themed land than the Disneyland version nowadays. I know I titled the video Tomorrowland Sucks, but in this case I really don't think it's that bad, with attractions like Space Mountain and the People Mover genuinely being some of my favorite rides in that park. Most of the problems in this version of the land is just that there's a lot of stuff in the land that is either neglected, forgotten, or in one particular case just needs to be torn down. I guess to start off with the positives, we have the most eye-catching attractions in the land with Space Mountain, People Mover, and Astro Orbiter. Astro Orbiter obviously isn't anything that impressive, it's just a Dumbo-style ride, but the way it sits on top of the People Mover building just looks really cool and gives the land some of that much-needed kinetic energy, and also the view from up there, especially at night, is just really nice. The People Mover is one of me and many other people's favorite Magic Kingdom attractions, which is really funny because looking at it nowadays, it's really not that special. It's just a slow little tour through Tomorrowland on a vehicle that really isn't all that futuristic, especially comparing it to some of the other stuff they have in these parks, but it's also just very relaxing, which especially nowadays when a Disney vacation causes more stress on people than the job they had to work to afford it, it's nice to have something like this that just lets you rest and enjoy it. I've always thought that the looks you get into some of the attractions has always been cool, and I really like the model of the original Epcot city they put in there. It would probably make more sense for it to be an Epcot, but hey, it's cool here too. Space Mountain is probably in my top 5, scratch that, like top 3 favorite Disney attractions, which is very funny since it's pretty much just an old and rough roller coaster without the lights on. There's something about this ride, especially the Disney World version, that I just find to be so charming, and a lot of it honestly has very little to do with the actual ride itself. I mean, to start off, just take a look at that building. It's very minimalist and white, which is usually annoying, but here the shape is just so recognizable and iconic that it's pretty much impossible for me not to like it. Sometimes I forget that in Disney World, and especially Disneyland, Tomorrowland just existed without Space Mountain, which I can't even imagine since that structure is just so integral to the look and feel of Tomorrowland in my mind. Which is why the one in Shanghai is just so off-putting to me, because there just isn't one, and that will probably never change. But then you get on the inside of the building, and just like the outside, it's so simple, but I also just like it anyway. You have all the windows of space to look out at in this dimly lit hallway where it just so happens that one of my favorite pieces of music ever is playing. I'm not going to play it by itself in this video because I don't feel like risking copyright problems, but I'll probably be playing it in the background right now, and if you want to just look up Space Mountain Star Tunnel music, I promise you won't regret it. The ride itself is a very simple roller coaster that is definitely made better by the space theme, since the darkness makes it seem way more intense than it is. Also, in this version, unlike the others, you actually have a little set piece at the beginning with astronauts and stuff, which is pretty cool. The ride is set up a lot like Matterhorn bobsleds at Disneyland, with there being two separate tracks inside of the building. If I'm not wrong, I'm pretty sure the layout is just an exact copy of Matterhorn, but don't take my word on that because I might just be lying. I didn't look it up before saying that. It's definitely extremely simple, probably a little too simple to be considered one of my top attractions of all time, but I also don't care because it's cool and awesome. Carousel of Progress is another thing that's here. It's not really my kind of thing, which is why I'm not talking about it much, but I understand that it's pretty historically significant, so it obviously needs to be there. Before we get into some of the stuff that I think brings the land down a bit, I almost forgot to actually talk about the land itself along with its theming. I think the look of this land is easily why I like it so much, because it just sort of has that retro future look to it, which I honestly think is what most Tomorrowland should probably do at this point. While the original goal of Tomorrowland was to be an actual showcase of futuristic technology and innovations, Disney has made it clear, both through their handling of the Tomorrowlands around the world as well as Future World at Epcot, that they are not super interested in constantly updating these lands to keep them up to date. That's why I think the retro future look works really well, since it's able to keep the futuristic theme the land is going for, while also making it timeless so they don't have to update it all the time. Don't get me wrong, I don't think this land handles that theme perfectly, and we'll get into more of what doesn't work in a second, but I think it's a good enough showcase of why that idea works, since I find all of the buildings and facades here to be pretty charming. Then you also have things like Sunny Eclipse at Cosmic Rays, which I think is pretty neat, and I just sort of wish there was more random stuff like that within the land. But like I said earlier, the main problems I have with this land are just the attractions here that really feel like they either need to be replaced or updated. I was going to mention Astro Blasters in this section, but they actually are updating it, so that's good. Tomorrowland Speedway is easily the thing that I think the most people want to see go, because, like, it looks kind of ugly. I'm a big fan of rides like Autopia, which we'll get into later, but this one just doesn't really have any of that charm that Autopia does, since it is literally just concrete. It's not even really futuristic at all. It's themed after a racetrack, which wasn't even futuristic when they built it. I obviously understand the value of having a ride like this, since it really appeals to kids, but I think they could just do it a little better, and they are also literally building a Cars Land in the same park. How about we put its replacement there? Monsters Inc. Laugh Floor isn't an attraction that I would necessarily say is in bad shape or is neglected, but honestly, it really doesn't fit the land at all. Like Tomorrowland Speedway, there's nothing really futuristic about it, so it's just an odd inclusion. This is also coming from someone who has some good memories of this show, so I'm not saying I want to see it gone for good, but I mean, yeah, it just doesn't really make any sense to have it here. There's also the building close by to Monsters Inc., which used to hold Alien Encounter and Stitch's Great Escape, and now holds absolutely nothing. Honestly, I don't even think they have to put a whole attraction here. Anything would be nice, really. I've neglected to mention Tron Light Cycle Run so far, and that's because I haven't been on it yet. It looks fun, and I kind of like how it's right next to Space Mountain, because you have that contrast between a fancy new modern roller coaster and a rinky-dink one from the 1970s. So overall, Tomorrowland at Disney World definitely has its ups and downs and is far from perfect, but to me, I still really enjoy it and think it's a genuinely good land. Now it's time to talk about Tomorrowland at Disneyland. Oh boy, this land is genuinely one of the most fascinating things ever to me, at least in the realm of Disney parks. Everything here is just a complete mishmash of styles and weird unneeded IP inclusions on top of ginormous, very noticeable parts of the land just being straight up abandoned where everyone can see. It's genuinely shocking to me that Disney has just left it like this for as long as they have. I mean, they aren't even trying to make it look nice. Look at that, it's just a whole attraction sitting there unused in like the very center of the land. When I took my first trip to Disneyland a couple of years back, I ended up really enjoying that park and found it very charming, since a lot of it's just so much smaller, but yet just as much or more detail is crammed into every single corner of that place compared to all the other Disney parks I've been to. Except for a few cases, most of the rides or lands in that park I would say are better than their Disney World equivalents, with the main exception being Tomorrowland. The first thing you see upon getting to the entrance of the land is this park's version of Astro Orbiter, which instead of being on top of a cool building and offering a cool view of the area, it's instead just sort of plopped right in front of the entrance. Now, you would think that the reason for this is because they don't have a building to put it on top of. Yeah, sure, that's why. Another weird thing about this ride is that it's seemingly going for a sort of steampunk look, which does not really fit at all with the rest of the land, since for the most part it's going for a space theme. I'm pretty sure the reason for this is because there was a time when they tried to make Tomorrowland and Disneyland more like Discoveryland and Disneyland Paris, which isn't the worst idea since Discoveryland looks amazing and is easily the most creative and interesting version of Tomorrowland. They even went to the lengths of painting Space Mountain brown. It just looks wonderful, doesn't it? But when eventually they decided to go back on this change, they just never really fixed the Astro Orbiter, and so to this day, the ride just has a completely different look from the rest of the land. But then when you move past this ride, the first thing you notice is what almost looks to be a track for some sort of ride. But there's no ride. So there's a whole history as to why the People Mover is no longer in Disneyland. The short of it is that around the same time they made Brown Mountain, they also started messing around with the People Mover to see if they could make it go faster, and then they broke it. And then they literally did nothing after that. So that leaves us in the situation we're in now, where Tomorrowland is missing one of the best Tomorrowland attractions, but also there's just a ghost track sitting there constantly reminding you of what used to be. As much as I really like the People Mover, I could live with it not being there or being replaced by something else, but the fact that they are just leaving it there to rot with no plans on doing anything with it anytime soon is a serious problem because it sort of just makes the land look bad. And then there's the weird thing on top of the old People Mover load area, which obviously used to be where the rocket jets were. And I mean, come on, there's nothing there. Just put Astro Orbiter back up there, and then at least that building will do something. Nearby the entrance, we also have Star Tours and Astro Blasters. Astro Blasters is pretty take it or leave it for me. The only reason I was kind of positive about it in Disney World is because they are finally updating it. But Star Tours, though, I love that crap. It is a little weird to me that Star Tours is in Tomorrowland, since while Star Wars has a lot of futuristic stuff in it, it's not necessarily about the future. I mean, we've all seen the opening title thing. Obviously, when they built it, there was no better place to put it that would make any thematic sense, so I mean, I get it. It's just that when there is a full Star Wars land in the same park, it feels a little weird. But don't get me wrong, though, I do like Star Tours. Then we have Star Wars Launch Bay. Can we get rid of this thing already? And I do mean both of them. I'm gonna be real, I've never been in this thing, but I still don't like it. This Tomorrowland is especially low on space, and I think that this space would be much better spent on anything else. Autopia and Submarine Voyage are two of the larger attractions in this area, and obviously I think that it's very important that these two rides stay there. Autopia is a very simple attraction, but I also think it's very charming and I really like it being there. And then there's Submarine Voyage, which is genuinely just a really cool concept. There are plenty of rides that simulate going underwater, whether through screens or cool effects, but nowadays you would never get something like this where they built actual submarine ride vehicles that are in a giant lake of water. I'm not really a big fan of the Nemo theme that they just sort of slapped on, but if that's enough to convince Disney executives that it should stick around, then I guess I can live with it. The final attraction here I've neglected to talk about is Disneyland's version of Space Mountain. After the original in Florida got as popular as it did, they decided to make another one for Disneyland, and yeah, it's pretty good. A lot of the stuff that I found charming about the Orlando version isn't really here, but in exchange for that, we have a better load area, better ride vehicles, and also just an all-around smoother ride experience. You also have music that plays along with the ride, which I really enjoy and adds a lot of personality to it. Overall, while I prefer the older one, this version is still very fun and is just nice to have in the park. The area around it isn't though. So when they built Space Mountain, they sort of built this whole area around it that is seemingly mostly unused nowadays outside of extra queue space for Space Mountain. The main use for this area was the Starcade, and I think you can put the pieces together on what the Starcade was. This is a cool idea, but now that this whole area is so underused, it all feels kind of like a waste of space. They definitely could do something cool here, and I hope they do, but based on their track record with some other things in this area, I don't think they will. As much as I dislike the state that this Tomorrowland is in, I can't deny that I do find it a little charming. Things like Autopia, Star Tours, and Space Mountain are super enjoyable attractions, and just all the history of why this land is the way it is super interesting to me, and half the reason I find Tomorrowland and Disneyland enjoyable. Sure, it's the worst land in the park, but hey, you could say that it also makes it the most interesting. So in conclusion, Tomorrowland kinda sucks sometimes, but can also be pretty cool at other times. I mostly complained about Disneyland's Tomorrowland, but there really are some things to enjoy about it. Not a lot, but some. Plus, that version of Tomorrowland is where the original stood, which gives it a lot of historical significance, which is why it's even worse that it's in the state that it's in. Obviously, I left like the rest of the world out because I really only focused on the 2 lanes in America, but there are genuinely some cool versions of the land out there that I didn't go in depth on, like Discoveryland. I actually did talk about the version of the land in Hong Kong a little bit in my Marvel Parks video, so if you want my thoughts on Star Tours but with Iron Man, then go feel free to check that out. And in case anyone from Disney is watching and forgot I said this earlier, please oh please do something about Tomorrowland Speedway.